All right, everyone. Hello. Welcome to the session. Today, we are going to be learning about how we can build our AI skills so that we can be as effective of instructional designers as we can possibly be. And we have Dr. Luke Hobson with us, who is the Assistant Director of Instructional Design at MIT. So congrats on the promotion. Also an instructor at his Instructional Design Institute and a lecturer at the University of Miami. So it seems like Luke is always talking at conferences or different universities, educating the industry about AI specifically lately, it seems like. So I learn a lot from Luke when I meet with him. I'm excited that Luke joined us here to share his wisdom with us all and put us onto some good resources, tools, tips, tricks, all of the above. So thanks for joining us, Luke.
Absolutely, man. My pleasure. Happy to be here.
I have a few questions for Luke prepared, and then we're going to turn the questioning over to you all. So if you want to ask questions as we go, I think Nathan is also here, and he will help curate those questions for us. And I also have some questions for you all before we get started. So I want to know where you're at in your career journey. Are you trying to get into the field? Are you a manager? Are you working as an ID? I just shared that poll with you, so go ahead and answer that. Okay, most of us are working as an ID currently. Nice. About a quarter of us, it looks like, trying to get into the field. Very good to know. Cool. It'll be good to have y'all's perspective who are working in the field, especially when it comes to these AI tools, and hear what challenges you're facing and stuff like that. So my next question for you all is what your experience level is with these AI tools. Have you never used AI tools, or are you using them constantly every hour of every day? Okay, only a few of us so far haven't used any at all. So this will be a good session for you. And a pretty good range, it looks like. Almost half of us use it a few times, and the other half of us are using it regularly or all the time. Cool, yeah, this will be a good session for y'all, especially if you're still new to what AI is capable of. And then finally, what is your primary goal in learning more about AI? Are we trying to design some really innovative learning experiences? Are we just trying to keep up to date because we know the field is kind of shifting towards AI? What are y'all here for? Or are you just here to hang out with Devlin and Luke? That's okay too.
That's totally fine. If that's it, we're happy to be here. So
yeah, we can talk about anything.
it's true. It's true.
Okay. I like it. A third of us want to design more innovative learning experiences, and about 40% of us just want to stay up to date with trends in the field, and we know AI is kind of popping these days. All right, those are my questions for you all. If you want to elaborate, feel free to do so in the chat. But I want to turn it over to Luke, and I want to hear about how Luke first found out about generative AI specifically. So was it when ChatGPT came out? When did it first come on your radar?
So what's really interesting is that I was working on a course at MIT with a professor. His name is Dr. Brian Subarana, and it was a course about designing AI products and services. This was in like 2019, 2020,
Wow.
early pandemic days. And inside of the course, in one of the videos, he mentioned about ChatGPT. And that kind of caught me by surprise because it's a weird name when you think about it. And I was like, what the heck is ChatGPT? And he was explaining about it inside of the videos. And he mentioned too that the technology, it's not there yet, but it's going to be coming. And then fast forward, I'm watching YouTube, a channel called Yes Theory, which is a bunch of friends who just go out, explore the world, try to be able to meet new people. And in one of the videos, they ended up using ChatGPT, an early rendition of it, to essentially design their entire travel itinerary by going to Tokyo, Japan. And what was kind of funny about this was that because it was in the early days, things weren't really right. It mentioned that they should be flying around with mobile Gundam robot suits and they should be fighting each other inside of those. And it's like, yeah, that's not a real thing. But like I can see where it pulled it from with anime and manga and culture and stuff. And then all of a sudden, sure enough, this began to actually emerge more and more inside of our space, where luckily for me, a friend of mine, Peter Shea, he's the founder of the Facebook group Instructional Designers in Education, and he kept on pinging me. And he's like, you got to use this ChatGPT thing. It's like, what are the chances it's the same thing that I heard about years ago? And now all of a sudden, here we are. And my world has now become Gen AI and talking about it, which I never thought that would be what I'd be doing right now with you. But that's how it got to this point.
I see. Nice. So you saw it before it was what it is today, and you're like, this neat, but not really practical.
Right. It's like I didn't understand the connection about how we in instructional design would actually use it, because the course talked about it from improving healthcare, and it mentioned about
Mm,
all these other different industries, like with 3D printing and using robots. And I was like, okay, interesting. But for what we do, I was like, nah, it doesn't make sense. And then,
yeah.
yeah, I'm wrong, clearly, because now look at what it's evolved into now. But I would have never known that years ago. It wasn't there yet.
Yeah. Do you remember when you started, like when you used it in its modern format for the first time, and when you realized, like, okay, this is going to actually start affecting my work?
Yeah, it was after I told my friend Peter like 5 times, "No, I don't wanna be able to use this thing. It's another trend, it's another fad, it's gonna die, like, we're not gonna be able to talk about this in a couple of years. It'll be another thing that we're gonna be talking about." And then finally, he's like, "Give it a chance." And I was like, "You know what? Fine. I'm gonna take my syllabus for my instructional design course, I'm gonna copy and paste my learning objectives, and I'm gonna ask it to evaluate my learning objectives and to write better ones." And then sure enough, it wrote learning objectives, and I'm looking at them, and to be fair, they're not better than mine because they still use the terms like understand, know, learn. You're like, yeah, well, they're not
Ooh.
better, right? But at least it was doing something that I could relate to and see about how this could connect into our space, where before
Mm,
I did not see the connection. And then that's what started me down this rabbit hole of, okay, if you can craft learning objectives, kinda, can you create scenario-based problems? Can you create different forms of learning activities? Can you help me with trying to be able to do different things as far as for trying to increase my productivity, so I'm not doing some of the boring tasks every single day? And sure enough, it kind of kept on morphing into what it is now with GPT 4.0, which is nuts to think about.
yeah. Yeah, that was some of the early tests I was putting it through as well. Like the learning objectives, it's like, let's see how it does. And like 4 out of 5 of them will be pretty good. And then it will throw in like a understand these concepts.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, like the other thing that it kind of kept on mentioning about too was of learning styles. And I was like, no, don't talk
oh,
about learning styles. And it kept on like
yeah,
reinforcing. It's like, okay. It's like, so how am I gonna now we can actually get around it, but it's
yeah,
still we kept on perpetuating myths where it's just like, no, 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 hold on. Let's talk about this. So
yeah.
yeah, it's been interesting.
So what do you think? Because you use AI pretty regularly now. I think it's safe to assume.
All the time. Yeah. All the
um,
time, yeah.
what do you think? So after you started playing around with it and you're like, okay, it's not exactly where I'm at, but it's like interesting. Like, what do you think drew you to it or made you want to like keep using it? Because you dove in pretty headfirst, pretty early compared to like a lot of people.
So what was interesting too, and I got a lot of flack for that, by the way, but I kept on like, if you go back and see some of the old YouTube comments on my videos, a lot of people were fighting me because they're like,
Wow.
this isn't going to be many
We
traditional
I remember we
academics.
talked about that, and in the higher
Yeah.
ed
I was
space, you
like,
said a lot of people were pushing back even.
oh yeah,
Yeah.
which is now like, and granted, rightfully so, it's not perfect. We should
Yep.
absolutely be talking about setting up AI policies and guidelines and ethics and like that. That's absolutely all a thing. But it was that very traditional academic sense of we're not going to be talking about this in 6 months. Why are you wasting my time? And kind of blah blah blah. And then now it's just like, well, hold on a second. This is all that we kind of keep on talking about. And what I started to be able to really dive into more, I think I was kind of lucky enough, right place, right time, of I'm already testing on a number of things for what we do within our space. But at the same time, at MIT, I've now created 4 different types of AI courses with faculty. And one of them was literally a 6-week Gen AI course. So as
Wow.
I'm building this course with these faculty, I'm thinking about what we're doing and I'm like, oh, I can take this part and bring it to instructional design land, and I can do this and this. And now eventually it's led to all these different types of examples that I never thought were going to be possible. Do you want to give you a few of just like
Yeah, let's talk
things
about
I've been doing?
those
Yeah.
examples, those use cases. Yeah, fill us
So
in.
one example, and for those of you who maybe are not as well versed within the generative AI space, it goes far beyond ChatGPT. That's just obviously the big name one with OpenAI's product. So we keep on talking about that, which is more about this type of text generative model. So think about for ChatGPT, Google has originally is Google Bard, and now we have Gemini. We also have Meta's version of Llama. There's other ones as well too. Then there's also video generation tools. And this was something that's kind of interesting that we used for one of the courses. Going back to Dr. Subarana's course, what he mentioned about inside of there for one of our team meetings was that it was taking so much time to update everything in real time because, of course, his course is on AI and constantly things keep on coming about. And he's like, I need to be able to create a more efficient way of spreading these announcements. So we use a tool that's called DID. D-ID is the name of the tool. And it was able to create a virtual representation of him. It was able to clone his voice with a sample of it, and then he writes the scripts for the course's announcements, and that's how those get posted now, is like a virtual video version of him sharing those announcements. And those started to be able to spread. I know like Synthesia has one. There's a few different types of those
Yeah,
tools
Hey
as
Jen,
well.
I've seen.
HeyGen,
Yeah.
yep, and HeyGen is also doing incredible things as far as for with the video translations, which is something that
Mm.
I really like. We're getting there. It's not there yet, but we keep on getting closer and closer. And I've been experimenting with that of uploading videos of myself and then putting it into Spanish and then sending them to folks who do speak Spanish that I know. I'm saying like, how
Wow.
far away is this? Like, is it like 80%, like 90%? And it's getting there. My
Wow.
problem though, I speak in idioms all the time,
Hmm.
which because I'm from New England, I just say all these weird phrases that you can't translate that into like Japanese. It just doesn't make sense. So that's getting there. But another example has been with custom GPTs. I've been creating up a storm with those in the earlier days, and I'm one of those interesting people who pays like the $19 a month for GPT-4. But I created one that was called Your UDL Pal, because I'm really passionate about universal design for learning, and I wanted to see could I do more from UDL and from accessibility perspectives, put that together inside of a custom GPT that could help out educators to upload different types of ideas and check them as far as for different types of perspectives and make sure that they're following everything from the latest with accessibility standards and guidelines and giving them more suggestions around how to make their courses more UDL friendly. So
Nice. Before we dive deeper into the custom GPTs, maybe we should explain what those are, maybe to people who might be newer and not familiar with what the heck a custom GPT is.
yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Great point. So, for a custom GPT perspective, that is your own version where you are uploading data or trying to be able to source information online to putting this inside of, think about it like a customized chat GPT, where instead of taking all the information from the internet, you're now trying to boil it down into one core part, and you can train the model to be able to respond in different types of ways. So why that's going to be important too, we mentioned a little bit before about learning styles and how this myth is still persisting inside of our field. I trained that GPT to be able to say that when somebody asks about learning styles, to gently guide them into a direction explaining about how research has debunked this for many, many years, and trying to be able to show more the highlights about preferences and the importance of that area instead. So because it is my custom model, it's going to say that because I trained it to do so. Whereas if you ask ChatGPT right now, it will go and happily share with you everything about learning styles. But
Okay.
it's not a response you can change.
Yeah, so we have the base ChatGPT trained on all these however many terabytes of data across the entire internet. And then you say, I don't want it to respond like the base ChatGPT does. I want to customize it a little bit, give it some custom instructions, some custom data. I want it to be more personalized to my use case. Now, if I'm
Exactly.
hearing about this for the first time, I might think, that sounds pretty complicated. Sounds like I need to know how to code. What language are we using to train these models?
I mean, luckily, and this is kind of like the whole thing with OpenAI, we're trying to make it as user friendly as possible. So you do not need to be able to code anything or to do anything of a sort. It's a simple prompt. That's just a text
So good
box
old
where you can put
English.
in a paragraph now and just upload files or to say where to pull the information from. So if you personally do not have the data, I was saying that I want you to cite sources from the CAST website. Like that's where I want you to pull the information from, directly from the source of UDL, and then same thing too with the guidelines and accessibility standards going into that website. So being able to pull from that
Nice.
is easier than ever.
Nice. Yeah, and seeing some good perspectives shared in the chat as well. Eva thinking, why do we care? When you mentioned, why do we care about it? In a few months, we'll forget about it. Makes Eva think of her parents. Computers won't seem like black magic, hesitant to learn about them. Same with AI today. Yeah, it's here to stay. Definitely ethical concerns to discuss. I'll need to do a YouTube video maybe about that. Maybe you already have
Absolutely.
YouTube videos about that, but yeah,
I don't. Nope, I don't. But I need to be able to dive into it more. I know I've talked about it in the podcast and shared
yeah,
more about that because the other thing too, pertaining with like OpenAI is still a company. So when you are uploading your information, like you are willingly knowing that you are submitting your information into this type of database. So
hmm
that has been cause of concern for different companies because you had the fellow over from, I think it was from Samsung, who uploaded all their financial documentation into an LLM and that got leaked. And it was just like, yeah, because you
ooh,
shouldn't do that. It's,
yeah,
you know, you got to be very
yeah,
smart and careful of what you are uploading, especially pertaining to IP and sensitive information.
yeah.
Yeah.
And then Jacqueline also mentioned Notebook LM, which
Yeah.
I know has been a really big time saver for people in the industry. I don't know if you want to
It
talk
has
about
been. The,
your
the
experience with
other
that.
The other one with Notebook LM too, and if you haven't used Notebook LM yet, by the way, think about this as having a type of a AI generated podcast based around something that you are going to be uploading. So I did that with one of my articles where I asked it to be able to craft up a podcast based around what I wrote. And what makes it interesting from Notebook's perspective is that you have two different voices trying to be able to have this podcast conversation back and forth, much like what Devin and I are doing right now. And what's kind of odd though is that it will intentionally put in breaths. It will say and it would make pauses. It's trying to make it sound more lifelike. And it's odd because like it warps your brain into being like, oh, they're real people. And then you're like, wait, no, we're not. Wait, hold on. Why is it breathing? Like that's not that's you
Uh,
shouldn't be taking a deep breath before a sentence, and it will. And podcasters, and I'm not sure if you do this, Devlin, for yours, but many people edit out the breaths
yeah,
because
yeah.
they find it annoying. And Notebook LM is like, no, we're intentionally putting it in there to make it more real, which is like, what?
That's what I first thought of. I'm like, that's funny because when you're new to creating content, you're like, I need to not use any filler words. I need to be like so succinct and efficient with my communication. And I was never good at that. And I was like, done is better than perfect. I'm just gonna let it run, and that stuff is included. But pretty funny that the AI is like, no, we're gonna mimic the humans.
Yeah,
We know that
I
they
know.
take breaths and stuff. Yeah.
Like fun new dystopia with that. Have you used Google's Illuminate?
No, I have not.
So
I'm
Notebook
not familiar
LM
with that.
was the first. So Google has been making something called Google's Test Kitchen, by the way. You can go and experiment with all these like beta versions of products. Some of them make
Mm.
sense. Some you're like, yeah, it's kind of it's all right, and they kind of fade away. But they have Illuminate. And what Illuminate is for any of you who want to be able to save time when it comes to research, because I have a ton of journal articles that I follow. I have a ton of different types of white papers saved on my desktop that I know I'm never going to have the time to be able to read everything. Most are 20 pages plus. So, what you can do is with Illuminate, you can search for this information. It will pop up scholarly sources and it will make a podcast episode based around which ones you choose. So that way
Mm.
you can actually listen to that, which is an interesting time saver because sometimes you'll read paper after paper and you realize it doesn't have the information that you're looking for. Of course, this doesn't substitute for the fact that you should still be using that part of your brain and going through with everything. It's a good exercise, especially for any of you who are inside of the educational space. You should be doing that. But once again, it is a time saver if you don't have time. And I'm not going to read a white paper while I'm driving to work. I can't, you know. So
Hmm.
it's like, yeah, I'll do this here. So it makes more sense.
Yeah. Heather also asked a question about the accessibility level of Notebook LM. I'd say very easy to use, very accessible. You kind of sign in, upload some docs that you want to use as source material, and then you can ask it questions. That's what I use it for when I want like that really precise response that I know is like directly quoted from the source instead of, yeah, like, minimizing hallucinations essentially so that the model doesn't just tell us something completely wrong. But that's what I use it for, just to ask big PDFs, very specific questions that I want to, and then it will like show me where it sourced it from in the PDF. And it's pretty easy to use, I would say.
Yeah, no, it's definitely easy to use. I'm taking that question as in more about like accessibility, like 508 accessibility,
Yeah.
is how I was understanding that question. And if that's also the perspective around that, Google's Notebook LM does not generate transcripts. And it's
Mm,
infuriating
wow.
because I'm like,
Wow.
great, I have a piece of audio and I have no transcript to go with it. So if you are asking more about the question along those lines, there are many types now of free transcript creators that you can try to be able to take the audio, or even heck, even in YouTube, you can upload it into
Mm-hmm.
YouTube and it'll create the closed captions automatically. And then you can go through and scrub and make sure that they're correct. And I've been doing that as well, just to make sure that we're still sure. Thumbs up. Thanks a lot, video of making sure that the information's correct. Because a lot of the things that we say within instructional design land, the words don't get picked up correctly with different types of closed captioning and such. Because like I say SME, I don't say subject
Mm-hmm.
matter expert, and it spells out like sneeze. And I'm like, no,
Mm.
no, it's not what I said. So yeah.
Nicole is recommending Otter.ai. I haven't used that, but yeah, a script I think I've used for transcripts. Yeah, YouTube is free, but that
Yep.
that that is so frustrating that they don't give you the transcript where they can generate the full audio.
I know.
Yeah,
Like, why wouldn't you just do that? It just kind of makes sense to have at
yeah.
least have a summary of with it for me to read. I don't know. It's weird. There is also, and I'll have to find it. I can send it to you later. There is a free generator too, but you don't even need to sign up for that. It takes any YouTube video, and it's like YouTube to transcript. I forget the name, but it literally will take the
Mm.
YouTube link, you put it inside of there, it creates a transcript automatically. Then you take that transcript, then you put that in a ChatGPT, and you say clean it up and to make it a readable transcript, and then it will
Mm.
perfectly format it for you.
Great.
So
Cool.
that's huge saver of time.
Okay. If any of
Yeah.
y'all have questions about other use cases, feel free to add them. I want to move it along. I have one or two more questions here, and then I want to
Sure.
turn it over to the audience and get to all of your questions. So what about AI skills generally? Like, what do you think some of the most important skills are that instructional designers can build to make sure they're like AI enabled, so to speak?
Absolutely. So the best skill that you can work on right now is with experimentation. You should be thinking like a researcher because, as Devlin mentioned
Mm.
not too long ago, many folks still do not understand about the capabilities of AI, the power of it, the pros, the cons, everything of the sort. The more that you can speak to it and the more that you can show to whether it's going to be your employer or to a future employer about how these are transferable into this space, the better it's going to be. And the thing that I have found from speaking with a lot of educators over the last couple of years around Gen AI is that they quit too soon. They get a first response back from something like with Gemini or ChatGPT or something, and
Mm.
they're looking at it and they're like, oh, the response isn't good enough. So then they're done. And it's interesting because even the smartest people in the world are going to quit too soon. To give you an example, I did a talk the other day at Harvard for their division of continuing education, and I was teaching these Harvard faculty about Gen AI, UDL, and how it all kind of comes together for their classrooms. And I was asking them to be able to use, they had their own custom GPT that we built out for them. And it was interesting because I was actually seeing in real time for some of them where they're like, oh, it's not the best answer. It's okay. And there was one professor who was like, this is a great assignment. He was working on a new assignment and trying to revise it in his classroom. And he revised it for him. And he's like, it's great, but it's way too long. I'm never going to use this. And I could tell immediately he was just like, haha, I gotcha. I told you AI is not going to be great. And I was like,
Mm.
well, what's the maximum amount of words that you want? He's like, oh, 200 words. It's like, so then why didn't you actually follow that up with then saying revise it to make it be the maximum of 200 words? It's like, I never thought of that. I was like, yeah, like that's it, man. Like you can't just quit the first time. So keep on experimenting with this and trying new things. There was even a paper that came out not too long ago from a learning engineer at Carnegie Mellon, and what he described about was these different types of circumstances of how it's helped the learning engineering team at Carnegie to be able to save time when it comes to designing learning experiences. And one of the things that he mentioned about, which is a really valuable piece of information, is to upload templates and examples for what you want to be able to have the tool give back to you. So if I want to be able to draft up a new type of a scenario or a role-playing activity or whatever it is, I can feed it versions of my own that are at the right level that I want to be able to then recreate and generate into something new, so that way it's not starting from zero. It already
Mm-hmm.
has a reference it can go back to and say, oh, okay, Luke's thing looks like this. It needs to at least have these same level of details, this amount of words, and so on and so forth. So just don't quit. Keep on
Yeah.
trying new things and pulling it in and seeing what happens. That's my best tip for the audience.
Yeah, yeah, because there's a lot of like in my experience, even still with like new stuff that I think could potentially save me time, but I don't want to make the space to commit to right now. It's like, yeah, there's some skepticism like, is this actually going to be worth it in the end? It's like, there's going to be like a ramp up period to actually mess around with the prompting and try the different tools and like figure out which one will work best. So it can feel kind of like intimidating or overwhelming when you have all of your like daily tasks you need to get done. But yeah, it's like making that space to be like, okay, we're gonna run some experiments. Maybe some of them will be duds and a waste of time, but maybe other ones will, help me do this like 80% faster or something.
And there's some things too that you won't realize can actually work in different types of situations. So you file it away to say like, okay, that's kind of cool, but how can that work for me to be able to use in this type of capacity? And one of the tools that I'm experimenting a lot with is Runway.
Yep.
Runway is a video generation type of a tool, and the
Mm.
latest update that they just made is that now essentially you can turn yourself into a Pixar character with a white background, and it makes like a whole movie essentially based around what you're trying to be able to do. And it's insane. If you haven't seen it, the update
Cool.
came out not too long ago. A search for Runway on YouTube, and it's mind blowing to see what it can actually do. And before that, I couldn't figure out how I was going to use that. Where I'm looking at it, I'm like, wait a second, you're now telling me that I can create these different types of characters. I can do more from a storytelling perspective. Where prior months to that, it was essentially saying upload a picture and now you can make the picture move. I was like,
Mm.
well, cool, but how does that help me in my job? Like
Yeah.
it's neat, it's fun, but I don't get it. And then now here we are where it's like, oh no, you want to be able to create videos for your new virtual reality project? You can use this as a source file. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, well then now that changes things. Now that's valuable to me. Where before it was like, that's fun, but I don't get it. You know. So
Yeah. Yeah. So we're literally watching these tools develop from like, oh, this like quirky, cool, thing to like actually valuable use cases on the job. And it's pretty wild how far we've come in like even a year or two. So
it's yeah.
yeah, I guess my next question for you is about that. Like, how do you know about all these latest updates? How are you staying in the loop about, you know, all these different tools that are coming out, all the different updates to the different tools? How are you sifting through the noise to kind of figure out like what's actually valuable?
Yeah, it's tough. It's tough. So, like, I'm sure many people who are listening to us talk right now, I tried every tool every time it came out. I signed up for everything. I have 1,000 emails now in my inbox because of all these darn tools that I signed up for. And then I realized, or I was just like, wait a second, I don't have that much time. I do a million things like all of you, like, you're all very busy with everything. Your time is valuable. You shouldn't be spending it trying to sign up for every single tool and then experimenting. So I decided I need a different type of approach. So now what I do is that I follow these different types of thought leaders in the AI space, and I let them do that preliminary work to be able to say that this tool is great, or the tool's not there yet, give it more time. One of them
Mm-hmm.
who I've learned so much from, and if you're not following him on LinkedIn, is Ethan Mollick. From the Wharton School of Business. He's a professor over there, and he makes daily posts about different types of tools that he has been using. Runway was actually where I heard about it, was from him, and
Mm.
seeing the newest updates. I didn't realize that was a thing until he shared about it, and a couple of other different ones. He wrote a
Uh,
book that's oh, sorry, man, go ahead.
can you repeat his name, please?
Yeah, Ethan Mollick is his name. Mollick. Mollick.
Great.
I
All
feel like I'm
right.
in a spelling bee for a second there. He wrote a book that's called Co-Intelligence. If you haven't read that book yet, it's on Amazon. It's like one of the best sellers in the AI space at the moment. It is interesting because it's his journey of first using AI and seeing where it kind of takes him to. And at the end, he keeps
Mm,
on giving you more and more examples about how to be able to do this. And he's been following AI for years. So it's like the
great.
transformation of what it's become. You got to check out him. And then the other one who you should be checking out too, especially in the learning and development space, is Dr. Phil Hardman. And Dr. Phil shares things on a daily basis as well about AI and learning experience designers and how their worlds intersect. So if you haven't checked out her work yet, she's another one that you should be
Perfect.
diving into her research and seeing what works and what doesn't, because they're honest and they tell you, and that's super helpful. So
Oh,
that's how you
great.
stay up to date without
Yeah, I
signing up for
agree.
every product.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm on Dr. Phil's, I think, email list, and yeah, it's pretty nice. Yeah, seeing all like the research cited, and yeah, she's doing really cool work. So
Yeah.
good call
Yep.
outs.
Yep. She's crushing it. Uh,
Great. Okay.
so I can put it in the chat. Sorry, folks. There you go.
Okay, I haven't been keeping up with the chat as much. We're about to turn it over to audience questions. I did see someone mention a really cool like use case they were using AI for. I think it was Jose, about how they like made like an e-learning project with like a lot of practice activities to like teach like sales skills or something. And then with AI, they made 8 different like mystery companies, and like you as a salesperson have to like work with them and like use your skills and like I guess like solve the puzzle by like
Cool.
doing what you would need to do on the job. I love use cases like that where it's like role playing and simulating customer experiences.
So
Cool.
along those same lines too, something I was trying out this morning and it worked really well, which I don't know how I didn't do this before, but I wanted to ask ChatGPT to impersonate one of my instructional design students and to read one of my assignments and see if it could answer it all the way without getting confused or lost. So I wanted to see
Oh,
if I wrote out
yeah.
everything correctly. So I submitted one of my assignments to it. And sure enough, it was like, well, let me work through the problem. And it started to answer and go through with everything. And then at the end, it essentially gave me feedback where it's like, yeah, it was well written, it was clear. And then it made a point, though, that my students actually told me about before. And I was like, no way. Like, it's the same
Oh.
information, where they had to make an assumption. It was a scenario, and they had to make an assumption about what the background information was for this client that they would be working with. And I purposefully did not give them that information because I wanted it to be ambiguous. I wanted them to figure it out.
Wow.
And it mentioned that, where it's just like, well, hey, just FYI, I didn't understand this part. I made assumptions in my response. You might want to think about that for clarity. It's like, ooh, that's pretty good.
Yeah, I've seen people doing that, making like these AI user personas, basically, like exactly like you just described, and then using that to test like product update ideas or changes, and getting that instant real time. Yeah, that real time feedback is really helpful as a designer. Let's move into some audience questions. We have a little under a half hour left. If you're good with that. I'm seeing some repeated questions about creating like a private AI, or what was this? Like, how do we create our own AI? I'm scrolling up. The chat's moving somewhat quickly, but yeah, like kind of like the one you were mentioning. We mentioned custom GPTs, and that's like relatively easy.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and
So
yeah.
creating, there's a couple of different ways that I'm interpreting that too. So creating custom GPTs, you need to be able to have a GPT-4 subscription to pay the $19 a month, and creating that is relatively easy. There's a lot of tutorials online to being able to do so. Where it gets harder, and I'm not sure if this is where someone was going with that information, was then going to be creating like an AI agent, because now we're talking about creating a type of an AI chatbot that you are going to train it with your data to be able to respond back into your customers or whoever it's going to be served for. And that one is certainly a little bit more complex. Of course, if you do have, from a privacy perspective, from a data sensitivity perspective, if this is something pertaining to your company that you just wanted to be able to work with your customers, that might make more sense for you to build out your own custom AI agent. And if that's going to be the case, I would check out Google's Dialogflow is the one that I'll be looking into if that's what you want to be able to create. Riza is another one, and there's a few more as well. But I'd be thinking about it from that perspective of actually making a custom AI agent if that's what you want.
Yeah, if you have a strong enough computer, you can even run AI models on your own computer. So if you have like a gaming computer or something like that, there are different like interfaces and stuff you can do where you download the model. It might be like 30 gigabytes or something like that, and then you can chat with it just like ChatGPT. Now it's not going to be as good as ChatGPT because it's running on your like consumer hardware instead of like a huge warehouse of a huge data server. But when you do it that way, your data never, you don't even need access to the internet to use it. So you can, yeah, it can be like completely private in that way. And then there are middle grounds to that too. Yeah, like a lot of companies are kind of building their own, yeah, using their own AI models in house because they don't want to give their sensitive company data to other for-profit companies for security reasons and
Yes.
whatnot.
Yes.
So
And
yeah.
it's I just saw that one. It's Riza. Someone's asking
Yeah.
for the spelling of Riza.
Oh, nice.
There's a bunch. I just mentioned a few, but there's a ton if you really want to be able to do that. And then now, as even as we speak, Devlin, I'm not sure if you have gone down the path of the agentic AI yet. Have you gone
Mm-hmm.
down that road yet?
Yeah, I want to build some agents for our business, but that's one of those things where I'm like, I know this will pay out, will be such a time saver once we have it in place, but it's going to take a lot of work and experimentation to get it in place. And I've been kind of like not diving in yet because there's so many other things.
There's so many things. I mean, it's really interesting. And for those of you who don't know what that term is, because like I've been diving into this world recently more, think about it as in now you have your normal type of chatbot that someone would be using as far as with their doctor or with like Amazon or whatever it is. But now it's more like a super user. It can think outside of the box and the parameters that you are now setting, where now it's not so much like yes or no questions, but it's that somebody was writing into Amazon and saying that they are unhappy with how long that something is taking for their delivery, it could apologize and then it could actually offer like a discount code in the future. Or it could try to be able to do something else besides just this, like, oh, we're so sorry. Please call our 1-800 number.
Yeah, it
So
can
it's like,
actually take
man,
actions and do
yes, it can
stuff.
take
Yeah.
action. It can try to be able to solve the problem. So not just say yes or no, but try to find a solution that would be powered by an LLM. And
Mm-hmm.
that's now what people are diving on into. And we're going to have that where you're not just going to have your normal, to push one for yes or two for no. It's going to be like this crazy type of a much more deliberate way to try to help out users, which will be
Yep.
interesting to see.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, stay up to date on our YouTubes because yeah, I definitely want to do some experimentation and videos around that as we dive deeper. But I'm also seeing a lot of talk in the chat about like these tools and like, is there a list of our favorite tools? And when you were talking about like the Runway use case to make like the Pixar version of yourself, like it seems like are there any resources that we know of? Because if not, it would be helpful. Where it's like a list of all these different like AI use cases for instructional design and the different tools that you might use for those use cases.
I'm
It
trying
would
to think
probably
if
change on a weekly
I
basis,
was
but
gonna say I know I have them in slides and such.
yeah,
But as far as for a list offhand that I could put in the chat, I don't think I have one created, which
yeah.
you're right. We definitely should. So I can, you know what? I'm just gonna literally put it in the chat right now. So video generation is Runway DID is definitely what I've been playing around with. Suno is a music generator that you should try to be able to check out. That one is fascinating to be able
Yeah.
to use from that perspective. Google's NotebookLM and Illuminate is the other one from more of that podcast and that scholarly perspective. And then obviously the ChatGPTs, Claudes, Dollies, all of them. But
Mm-hmm.
those are a bunch. Thank you, Will, for sharing that for the futuretools.io. I will definitely check that out.
Also, I want to mention FreePick Picasso. Like they've been doing pretty good stuff, like letting you access multiple models from that single tool. So it's pretty good for like photos. It's good with voices now. Sound effects are coming soon. They have like rudimentary video generation, but they've been doing a lot of updates. And yeah, it's nice having tools like that where you don't have to have like 5 different tools open. You can just use one and it do good with whatever you need from it. So I like the way they're moving.
Yeah, and it's of course every time, and I just saw like someone just the chat's going crazy. I just saw someone's mentioning like other tools like Kling and everything else, and it's like yes, and then like in 2 weeks from now we're gonna have an even more better version. Like we're still waiting for OpenAI Sora to hit the market fully. I mean,
Yeah.
when Sora came out months ago, that was like whoa, like what? Like we just took a gigantic leap forwards from a video generation perspective. So whenever that comes out, and of course whenever GPT-5 hits the market, will be nuts. Yeah.
Yeah.
We'll see. We'll see. And
Let's
Jose, I
see.
believe you. You're saying it's better than Sora. I'll have to definitely check it out more. Check it out again.
We have more
Another thing that
questions on. Oh, go ahead.
I was gonna say, I keep on seeing questions around like with copyright and a few different things of that nature. So the thing, folks, when it comes with copyright and everything of a sort, this keeps on changing in real time, and it's very hard to keep up with. I'll be very honest with you. So you're going to see that there is, because right now there's a ton of pending lawsuits, which is the other thing, where once we do get a ruling for a number of things, that is going to change, because there have been lawsuits around, you can't use this image because your model was trained on all of our images. So therefore, you are indirectly stealing and creating this based around that. So it's like, how's that going to go? So we're going to have to be able to pay close attention to that lawsuit. And then from the music perspective with Suno and those other ones, even though right now they will intentionally say, but like if I try to be able to go into Suno and say, create for me a song that sounds like Taylor Swift's song, it will say, no, I can't do that because it's an artist. But if I were to try to be able to really keep on diving into specifics and try to make it as much Taylor Swift sounding as possible without actually saying her name, could it create something similar? Like, no, there's, if you really try to be able to do it hard enough, you can find some pretty surprising results. So that's tricky. Copyright is a very tricky subject right now that will certainly be timestamped if I give you another answer. Yeah. Besides just keep on diving into reading more, it's tough.
Yeah, the tool's stance seems to be anything you generate with this tool is your intellectual property. You own it, you're good to go. But whether or not the people who own the stuff that the tools are getting trained on agree with that, they obviously don't feel great about it. I notice on YouTube now I can like opt in to let the models be trained on like all of my YouTube videos.
Yeah.
I haven't given it permission to do that, but I'm like, should I?
Yeah. Well, did you opt out of LinkedIn training its models on your data?
Because no, I did not.
Oh, well, hey,
I was auto opted in on that one.
If you go to LinkedIn and go into your settings, you will see where there's a toggle switch turned on to say yes. Okay. So the automatic answer isn't no, it's yes. Please take my data and train your model with what I use. Okay. And you have to go in and shut that off. Now, of course, if you don't have a problem with that, you can keep it on. Then, like, okay, many people have been already feeding the LinkedIn machine by answering those like top voice badge questions of like, you're facing this situation, what do you do? And people have been answering away to be able to get that top voice yellow badge that essentially that was just trying to be able to scrap all of our best information for free. Which is cool. Definitely great. And they shut down that program now because now they have enough data. Fun fact. Yeah. Wow. So it's all just, every tool is now going to have this. So like we got to keep paying attention, and it's so hard to, unless if we share when we have these conversations and then we can tell one another as far as that goes.
Nice. Well, Jose said in the EU, the toggle is automatically no. So glad that your organizational bodies are looking out for you. I went ahead and turned mine off on LinkedIn. I'll make that decision when I'm ready. Cool. Okay. Yeah. So no hard answers on the copyright stuff. It seems like right now, the lawsuits are pending, but AI is definitely barreling full steam ahead.
Yes. And Maya, to your question, that is correct. That if you have this paid subscription for now, then you can use what you have currently from that perspective. But once again, you gotta stay on top of it. We'll see. We shall see.
We have a couple questions around generating visuals. So Husna is asking, what is the best AI tool for creating images that look realistic? And Nicole is asking, is there AI that's actually good at designing visual aids from reviewing like text? Like I'm guessing like generating supporting images for the text. So any standout AI image models?
I mean, I've always used DALL-E. I've experimented with Leonardo, and there's another one that I used for Midjourney was another one. I've always used a number of them to be able to see. Personally, I like to be able to use DALL-E, but as you have probably noticed from a Gen AI perspective, is that whenever you ask a type of a generative tool to be able to spell out words, it's not great. And it always, like, it's something with writing that it has such a tough time with. So if there's like, so as far as from like a visual aid perspective that I want you to be able to correctly write out this type of chart for me, those tools aren't really going to serve you the best. I know that there are things in the works as far as for how to be able to do that more with what was the tool? Have you found any tools yet? That there was one I saw that someone was using recently that was like an AI version of Miro.
Oh,
The
no,
name's
no production ready ones that I've seen so far. Yeah.
yeah, they're in the works. They're definitely in the works, but as of right
Mhm.
now, it still can't figure out writing. So yeah.
um Cool. Yeah, feel free to keep adding your questions. I'm just looking at the ones that Nathan pinned. We had one from I guess when we were discussing NotebookLM about the software converting the PDF into a podcast. But yeah, it can do that. Two people talking based on the content of whatever you upload. So it's pretty impressive if you haven't checked it out before. And then another question about custom GPTs, or a couple. One, can I train a custom GPT on images so that I can ask it to create graphics based on the uploaded images?
You can, but once again, because it's going to be crafting that graphic, I don't know what you have in your graphic, but you can. Yeah, you can do that.
Yeah, I think FreePic Picasso has a tool, well, at least to create like an AI version of yourself that you can like then use in like AI generated stuff. You like upload like 12 pictures of yourself, and then it creates a AI version of you that you can use in new stuff. So you could check out FreePic Picasso's like suite of tools. They might have something like that. But if you really want to take it further, you would fine tune like an image model and
Yeah.
feed a bunch of examples of images you want, and then it will make the generations get closer to what it is you're looking for. But yeah, fine tuning. I don't know if there are any. There might be tools out there that make it easier than like having to do custom code from scratch. I'm sure there are actually. I just don't know any off the top of my head for images.
Yeah. The other one that I see some people are talking about in the chat too is that from an image perspective, Canva and Adobe, certainly feel free to experiment with those, because same thing, they keep on doing more with making those tools better and better, and Canva is getting insanely great. I remember when Canva came out and it was like, it's okay. and now
Yeah,
to see that it can like actually edit videos in real time is like, whoa, like
yeah.
what are you doing? So that tool just kind of keeps on morphing and more and more. But from Adobe, I was playing around with the Photoshop Gen AI tool inside of there, and what I did is I took a picture of me standing in front of campus, and it was a selfie, and I asked it to be able to expand the picture's background to see what would happen, and sure enough, it like elongated the buildings, it put in more trees, but I could actually change things about my body too. So I would like highlight over my backpack and I would say change my backpack, and it would give me like a different one. But when I kept on doing that, it would actually change my body shape. So eventually, like my arms would be at different positions, and it would just kind of kept on like morphing into this weird thing. But it didn't look odd. It wasn't like uncanny valley where you're like, oh, that's not right. It never got to that point. But I even asked it to change, no, to give me tattoos on my arm. I was just like, put a tattoo here. And by doing so, it couldn't just fit it into the shape of my arm. So it had to give me a new arm. And then to put the tattoo on it was like, all right, that's pretty crazy. But it did look real, which was
Yeah.
it's something.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, it's good. It's good to document this, because then a year from now, when we're like, oh yeah, I can put tattoos on arms, no problem. So
Exactly.
it's funny. But we have a question from Wendy about custom GPTs too. At what point do you create your own custom GPT? Can we talk about the pros and cons of that?
Sure.
I have a use case I can mention too that I just recently did. Like I was recording like my annual update to like how to become an instructional designer, and I was like, let's use AI to do this. Like I wanted to try to make a custom GPT that was like trained on like the suggestions I would give people to help them become an ID, and like equipped with some of the resources we would recommend to people at different points in time. And yeah, so that was a custom use case. I was like, let's train an AI on our process specifically. But then if you just ask the AI, the base AI, it might give more general recommendations that, based on all the data it can find online. Whereas I wanted a more personalized version of that based on like our recommendations and stuff. So yeah, when you need it to be a bit more custom, what do you have anything else to say about that?
Well, because the big thing too with the boom was that previously ChatGPT was trained on data that went up to 2021. And that was the issue, was that there are many things that you wanted to be able to do, but it couldn't expand. So like the example that you gave, it would never have been able to do that previously, where now it can from those different types of source files, where you have to remember that everything that Gen AI is trying to be able to do is to please the user. So if something does not exist, it will create it in order to make you happy. And that's how, for all the folks in higher education, ran into these issues with fake citations because of the fact that it would ask for a citation of something that did not exist. So it would make up a fake citation. And then that's how that lawyer got into a lot of hot trouble as far as for with including that on an actual lawsuit. And then people were like, these cases aren't real. And he's like, oh, yeah, I use ChatGPT. And it's like, maybe don't do that to be able to do that.
Don't be that person.
No, so the custom GPT-2 of like when it makes sense to be able to do versus now where their ChatGPT can actually use the internet, so now it's so much better compared to it was even just a year ago, is a lot of trying to be able to guide the users into certain types of directions. Whereas, if they use the free version, it's going to put them down to one path, but you want it to go into a different type of direction. So if you want to have more control around what your users are going to be experiencing and what they're going to see, I would do that instead. And if you want it to also be more consistent, because right now you can try to be able to ask it something and it will just keep on giving you random information over and over and over again. And that could be a bit confusing depending upon your circumstance. So I would do that. Did you know, Devlin, by the way, that you wrote many instructional design books in the early days? Because back when I was asked about, like, before I had access into the internet, I was just like, tell me like the best instructional design books. And it would write off all of these different books that like you and I were mentioned about it and we didn't write them. And I was like, I know for a fact you didn't write that book. So it would either be like Julie Dirkson's book or what was another? There was another book as well that kept on popping up. And I was like, nope, we didn't write that.
Wow.
Which, fun facts. It's cool.
Yeah. AI hallucinates. Be wary.
It does. It does. And it's funny too, because like for different moments, we want it to hallucinate. Hallucinate like always comes with this type of, it's going to be the bad thing. It's like, but we want it to hallucinate for art and for other aspects. Like, yes, but in other cases, no, definitely not.
Margarita's asking if we want to incorporate an AI chatbot, but keep user data private, is there a way to do that?
That would be more through a paid service.
And my thought on that is it depends what we mean by private, because that AI model needs to run somewhere. And realistically, it's not going to be running on your user's computer because it's not going to be capable of that. So wherever that AI model is running, if it's running on OpenAI, then OpenAI is going to get all of that data. But again, what companies are doing is they're saying, we're going to have our own hardware. We're going to build our little server room or whatever it is. And then that's where these models are going to run. So then the user data stays like within the company.
Right.
So yeah, you could theoretically have a good computer or a good server, run the model on it, and that's what the data goes through so that it's not getting accessed by anyone that you don't want to have access to it. But it wouldn't be private in the way where it only exists on the user's computer, because it still needs to get to the AI model, and that's expensive to run currently.
Yep.
All right. How are we doing? We have a few minutes left. I think we made it through most of the questions in the questions tab. Do any of y'all have any follow-up questions about anything we've been discussing? I've seen a lot of good tool recommendations getting shared. Where do y'all want to take it for our last few minutes?
I mean, I can share too. I mentioned about that Carnegie Mellon paper. Let me find that thing quickly too, because that actually was a really good read. And while it was a little bit longer, it made a lot of sense to be able to do. So I'll drop that in the chat in a second too. There it is. Scaling evidence-based instructional design expertise through LLMs. There you go.
Good. Perfect. Yeah, let's grab that link. And then Janisha is also asking what we recommend instructional designers do to stay ahead of the curve when it comes to using AI in our field.
What are we doing to stay ahead of it? So there's a couple of different journals that I've been reading too that I'll just keep on dropping links in the chat so people can keep on finding these things. Because what I'm always curious about, and I saw that Will also just had a comment too about staying up to date from a academic perspective. If you folks have not checked out edtechbooks.org, incredible website, by the way, that I would 100% dive on into more of. And you can see those are all like open access types of resources to be able to see more around what people are constantly putting out there. And they're always updating. I'm literally looking at a few on AI right now at this very moment that weren't there before. So you can
Wow.
always keep on finding more different types of information that way. The other thing that I always subscribe to as well for different types of ideas has been, especially within the higher ed space, is that both from Harvard Business Review and MIT's Tech Review, I read both of those all the time because I want to see what they're doing, what they're up to, and what they're sharing. And those two I would certainly recommend to look at. And MIT Tech Review, I think it's free. So you can both check out those. That's why I stay up to date from that perspective.
Yeah, and I'd suggest just getting hands-on with the tools, right? Like practice working on your prompts. Like that's gonna make a big difference from someone first picking up an AI tool to someone who's been using it for a while. The quality of the output you'll be able to get from that tool is going to be very different if you know how to get the tools to do what you want, which is a lot of the prompt engineering stuff. Yeah.
So, Devlin, there's a question in here that I have to respond to from Sergio
Let's do
about at university level, how do you detect AI written types of text? You can't. And that's what's driving academics up a wall, is that there is no plagiarism detection software for AI that is accurate. You have zero GPT and you have all these other different types of tools that claim to be accurate. They are not. There is nothing at this moment on January 16th of 2025, as I'm timestamping this, that works. And that is hard. It's really hard then, because now for us as educators, we have to rethink assessments and assignments. We have to think about different ways for students to be able to demonstrate skills that are not going to be replicated by AI. And that's tough. At the same time, though, we will overcome it because we've done that with everything. I remember when teachers tried to ban smartphones in classes and told me that I couldn't use Ask Jeeves back in the day, to really date myself. And it's like, we're going to find a way. And same thing, too, seeing now that the government is banning TikTok and the number one app is TikTok's competitor that's like blown up called Red Note, that everyone's now using that instead. And it's like, yeah, it's not going to work. So we have to rethink how we do things. And that is the honest answer, which is so tough to do, but that's what you have to do.
Yeah. All right, y'all, we're at the top of the hour. I hope this was helpful. Luke and I are always talking about AI as well. I'm sure most of you are familiar with Luke, but if not, Luke has a YouTube video, podcast, a book about the things you wish you knew before becoming an instructional designer, which is a favorite. So yeah, we'll be creating content on this stuff every week. I'm posting a new AI video these days. So yeah, thanks for hanging out with us here for this hour. Make sure to follow Luke. Let him know that you appreciate his time. And we will see you all soon. Any final remarks you want to say, Luke?
No, just thank you so much for the invite. It has been a blast chatting with all of you. And like you mentioned too, I'm posting a YouTube short a day because I'm crazy.
Yeah.
So if you want a 60-second YouTube short, I'm making a ton. And it's interesting. Yeah. So if you want to follow along, that's what I've been up to. But once again, man, thank you so much for having me. It's been a blast and always happy to do this again.
All right, great. So yeah, Dr. Luke Hobson on YouTube. And then yes, this replay will be live tomorrow on my YouTube channel. So thanks everyone. Thank you, Luke. And we will see you all soon. Bye-bye, everybody.